Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to review a solo piano performance of Mad World by the piano channel Atlantic Lights. Now if you Google Mad World, this is probably the first piano video that comes up. And I decided to review it because there is just so much to talk about and so much to learn from the perspective of piano playing from this performance. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Jason Paul Peterson. I'm a professional concert pianist and hold a doctoral degree in piano performance from the Peabody Institute of Music. But I don't want you to take anything in any of my videos on the basis of authority alone. I'm going to demonstrate for you. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean so you can hopefully see and hear the difference and make your own decisions on the points that I make. I think there's a lot to learn, so let's dive right in. Here we go. Okay, now a couple things right off the bat. One of the things that really struck me when I watched this, and maybe it struck some of you too, is that the fingerings that are used in this piece are very, very odd. So already from the very first note of the piece, he starts on the second finger and goes up to 5. Now we have a sort of the outline of an F minor chord in this first phrase. Right, there's our F minor chord. And normally we would play an F minor chord with 1, 3, 5 because it puts us in this nice sort of 5-finger position. If I start with my second finger, then I've got 2 fingers here, 3 and 4, kind of blocked off for one note, which is a little awkward, but that's not the big issue. The thing that's really, really strange about this is in the first phrase, he leaps here from the second finger on the G to the third finger. Now this we would really never encourage in piano playing because what it does is it makes it impossible for us to connect the G and the E flat. And of course these two notes should really be connected. If I leap from 2 to 3, there's no way that I can do that. And I would say in general, as I look through the fingerings of this performance, what I notice is that it's just a lot harder than it needs to be. I mean, compare doing something like that with 2 leaping down to 3 to just doing something much simpler like 1, 4, 2, 1. And you can see how my hand really just stays in pretty much the same position there. Now the next phrase has another really extreme example of a strange fingering. We start here, and then he plays in a row, 2 and 2. That's another case of a very problematic fingering because it makes it impossible for me to ever connect those 2 notes. There's no way that I can connect a G that I'm playing with my second finger and an A flat that I'm playing with my second finger. So my general principle when I'm doing fingerings on the piano is basically be as lazy as possible in that you try to move your hand as little as possible. Now that's just sort of a general rule of thumb, but that's kind of the idea. You don't want to leap around a lot when it's not really necessary. And going from 2 to 2 brings absolutely no advantage whatsoever that I can see with it, because you want those notes to be connected, and why not just do it with 1, 2, 3, 4? It's so much easier. The fingering in this in general, and I'll point out some other examples too that are maybe very, very odd, but it kind of gives me the impression that the person that made this video maybe just sort of sight read through it and kind of freestyled some of the fingerings. And one of the other things that I notice a lot is that repeated passages, so you have exactly the same phrase being repeated a lot in this piece, that they're performed sometimes with completely different fingerings. And if you're learning a piece of music, really best if you have a repeated phrase to stick to the same fingering, whatever that is, because it's going to make it so much easier to learn, even on a subconscious level. If you don't have to jump around a lot and do different things every time, if you can be consistent, your brain is going to learn that fingering faster than it would otherwise. Okay, let's continue on. So, all right, we have a piece here which is based on a text, right? In the original version, this is sung. Now, there are a lot of interesting facets of piano playing when you're playing a piece that is originally sung. One of the things that you have to think about is, what are those words? You can't play the piece if you don't know the words to the song. Why not? Well, you have to know how you would emphasize something if you were speaking it, and you have to know where the breaks occur and which things are emphasized and connected in a particular way. So I'll give you a great example. Right at the beginning of this piece, we have the text, all around me are familiar faces. Now, the word faces, I would never, ever, when speaking that, take a break between fe and says. I would never say faces, right? That is really, really unnatural. What you'll notice if you watch this video is on a lot of those places, you'll see the lifting of the fingers between those two notes. That's a very bad thing to do because we want to be able to connect those notes, right? Now, I know a lot of you will probably say, but wait a minute, I'm using pedal with this, so it doesn't really matter. The notes are going to be connected anyway. Well, there are two things you need to keep in mind with that. There's a really, really good reason why professional pianists will always connect those notes if they're playing. First of all, it helps us to feel and emphasize the notes much better. It helps us to feel the connection between the notes if we're actually connecting them with our fingers. If we're lifting up, it's much, much harder to really make those notes sound connected. But the other issue is, if I'm connecting with my fingers, I can spontaneously decide to use less or more pedal based on the room and the hall and the environment that I'm playing. And if I am already lifting my fingers, I'm not going to be able to do that. If I go off the pedal, then suddenly you're going to notice, oh, you've got a big break in the sound. So, well, why would I want to change my pedal spontaneously? A lot of times when you're playing a concert somewhere, you're playing in public somewhere, you'll be in a place that suddenly maybe has more reverb or more echo in the concert hall or in the space. And if that's the case, everything is going to sound really blurred together. So what you want to do in a case like that is to use much less pedal, but still keep the notes connected with your fingers. And that's why it's really important in places like that to already have internalized the idea of connecting those notes with your fingers. Now, that's one issue. That's the pedal. The other thing here is the emphasis of the words, the text themselves. Think about how we say that phrase, all around me are familiar faces. Familiar faces. There's a particular emphasis to that. You really, really want to do that when you're playing it. And that's unfortunately missing in this piece. And I mean, I find it kind of funny, but I also find it kind of sad. You want to lean into those notes like faces and come back on the second syllable. That's why I say it's absolutely important for any piece that you're playing, that you're doing as a piano solo that has text originally, that you know the text of what it is you're playing. And think about the way that you would emphasize that if you were singing it or if you were speaking it. Very, very important. Let's continue on. So you hear a lot of times the last note of the phrase is just as loud as the note before. And that's not really a positive thing. Yeah, now I'm going to give you another example of a really, really bizarre fingering here that I just don't understand for the life of me. This sort of thing. Okay, he uses that fingering, but then after that, leaping from 2 to 2. This is just really, really absurd. There's no reason to do this, especially because, look at this, I can play the entire section in one hand position. I can just stay right here. I don't have to do anything. The same thing, by the way, at the beginning. I can keep this in a 5-finger position. I don't have to move my hand at all. And if you're leaping around like this, like I said, it just makes it so much harder to learn. It makes it so much harder to internalize, and especially when you're doing different fingerings on different phrases. So I mean, one time you have 2 and 3, and the next time, for no real reason, you're using 2 and 2. Why? It's in both times it's going from an F up to D. Same phrase. Why leap up to 2? It's now you might say, okay, it's an easy piece. You know, it doesn't really matter that much. Sure, I mean, it's not like he has a problem playing those notes or getting to them in time or anything, but it is an issue. It becomes an issue, like I said, with connecting the notes and keeping the phrase connected. This is just really sort of piano technique 101 and would be much, much better to stick to a single fingering. Even maybe if it's not an ideal fingering, at least you're doing the same thing each time. will make it so much easier to learn. If you're interested, by the way, in a tutorial on this piece, I have one on my website, petersonpianoacademy.com. You'll be able to loop a particular section. If you want to loop between an A and a B section of the song over and over, you can set an in point and an out point. And also, all members of my course have the opportunity to correspond with me, send me a recording, get input on your own playing anytime that you like. Let's continue. You know, what you can also really think about in a piece like this, and I would love to hear a little bit more of it in this performance, is more of a sense of going up when the phrase goes up and making a little bit of a decrescendo coming back when the phrase goes down. So, right? And not hammering the last note of the phrase, not sitting on that note, but coming back. Makes it just nice and rounded. Another thing in the left hand, you should always know the meter of every piece you're playing and think about what that means for performing it. So in this case, I have a 4/4 meter, and the emphasis, not only in the meter, but in the text as well. Dun, 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 bum. We have this emphasis on the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to put just a little bit more on beats 1 and 3 because you have twice as many notes on beats 2 and 4, and those are actually the weak beats in this song. So you're playing with the weak finger, beats 1, and then you're playing beat 2 with the more strong fingers, and so that tends to create it's kind of the opposite effect. I'm exaggerating a bit, but we end up getting 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the opposite of what we want. We want 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, and so on. So this is an important thing to think about in terms of emphasizing the notes. And another thing is, you know, this piece being originally sung as it is has this natural separation between the voice and the piano. We, as solo pianists, need to make this a little clearer and do a little more. I'm going to show you so you can hear the difference. Now, let's compare once in the sound. If I play both hands sort of the same volume, or if I do this. So you hear in the second version more on the top. It just helps the melody to shine a little bit more. And it's important as a beginning or intermediate pianist to really start to develop that ability of separating the hands. All right, let's continue on. Yeah, a little bit too much emphasis on the last notes. But, you know, I will say what he does really well. The notes are all fine. The rhythm is fine. Keeps a very steady tempo. His pedaling is also very clear. You know, we have very clear chords that change every measure in this piece. You want to lift the pedal and be sure that you have a new pedal for every chord. You don't want to let those chords blend together. If I did something like this, you hear how things start to blur together. We don't want to do that. We want to keep the harmonies really separate from one measure to the next. And that's very, very nice in this video. Now, a personal idea that I have about this particular arrangement, as it were, in the original version, when we have these different verses, it gives us something to latch onto that's new, right? We have a new text suddenly. And actually, in the original version, when we come around to this repeated section, you hear the addition of cello, you hear the addition of some string instruments, and that already creates this really nice contrast the second time around. We don't have that in a solo piano version that just has a repeat sign. So we need somehow to create a contrast in the second section when we repeat it. We could do that in a number of ways. You could change the dynamic, but I don't think it works so well in this case because the whole piece it does sort of generally have the same character throughout. But what I would recommend Just my own personal idea, and you can take it or leave it, but I think this would be great the second time around to maybe add an additional voice. You could do it underneath the one that's here, so you could do something like this. Or you could put it on the top, something like this. That would just give it a little bit more interest. It would keep it interesting for the audience. They would have something new. They would hear something new. You could maybe even take the left hand down an octave. Do something like this. Just change it up a little bit. And another idea that I had as well, why not a little bit of improvisation? This would be a great place just to do a little bit of... something new. Otherwise, when we don't have the changing text like we have in the original version, it can tend to get a little boring over time, and we always want to keep the audience engaged as much as we can. All right, continuing on. Yeah, and even here, in my opinion, mad world, right? The mad should be more and a little bit less on world. In general, I just think there could be more attention given to the emphasis of the words, of the text, the balance between the hands, and really, really, primarily in this video, I think what we can all take away from this is keeping things legato with the fingers, keeping them connected anywhere that you have in the text something that would be connected, and trying to keep your fingerings as consistent as possible. So this pianist does a really good job of capturing the overall character of the piece. From a technical standpoint, there are some things that could be better that we talked about in this video. I hope you found some things that you've learned from and that you can apply to your own piano playing. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you again soon.